Hello, everyone. Welcome to
Hi.
Forum Friday. On
Thank
Forum
you, everyone, for
Friday,
tuning in early. How are you?
we have Mark and I
Yes.
covering forums. Hey, Mark, how's it going in Canada?
Excellent. Excellent. Where are you hanging out these days?
Oh, still in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So we're still a half a world away almost.
Yes, yes. Um, how's it going on at the forums? What's the membership at now? I mean,
It
how
has
many
been
how many
busy.
members do we
We
have?
are 15 members away from hitting 2,000. We are at 1,985 members right now.
That's
Yeah.
great.
It's been
That's
a steady 8% growth all through the past month again. And engagement is still high. We have well over 50% of the members are engaged. There's almost 1,200 members who are engaged in the engaged means they actually look at the posts, read them, respond to them, so on. We have 277 posts this month, 260 comments, and 420 reactions. So it's been lots of stuff happening, right? So it's been really cool.
awesome. Yeah, and are we able to talk about some of the hot topics today?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a lot of. I picked out a couple
Yeah,
for you.
I
Yeah.
know. That's this one about making baking powder. What's
Yes.
that all about?
This is a member who is interested in making baking powder for the baking industry where he is in his region. And so he's come to the baking industry professionals group to ask for advice on how to do that, what his ratios
So,
need to be,
what
and
is
so
he
on.
trying to make a baking powder
Well, that's what we need
for?
him to clarify a bit more, is that while in retail we just see like baking powder from various brands that all tend to be similar, and most of them are made up of similar leavening acids such as sodium aluminum phosphate and monocalcium phosphate, things like that. In the baking industry, it's much more targeted than that.
Mm.
There's a different balance for cakes where we want a little bit more delayed reaction than versus, say, biscuits like the tea biscuits and scones and things like that, where we want a quicker upfront reaction. And then tortillas is a little bit more upfront and some delayed, because with tortillas, the baking powder also helps with the browning process of the tortillas, right? And so there's lots of different balances that he needs to keep in mind. And helpful for that is, of course, Bakerpedia. So, what we've started off with is providing some links to each of the most common leavening acids that are used, so that I suggest learning to understand the rate of reaction, the ROR, as the scientists like to call it, and the NV, the neutralizing value. That is how much of the soda does it neutralize. And rate of reaction is, of course, how quickly it produces CO2. And this will help guide you in creating the type of blends and reaction that you want. And so that all that information is available on Bakerpedia. And so I've helped out in that thread a little bit to give some pointers on where to find it. And it's one of those things. It's a great learning tool.
That's true. You're the guy to ask because I don't know too much about baking powders. So thank you for chipping in there.
Yeah,
I will
I
let
had a very unique experience with it many years ago. Cake donuts are one of those ones that are very, very tricky with baking powder. And we
yeah.
actually had two specialists from our supplier spend a week with us in our lab to get it balanced properly. And so that is how tricky it can be to get cake donut mix to perform exactly right.
Yeah. Well, Next, let's talk about issues with breads and sweet buns. What is this about humectants?
Well, this is a nice, clever post. And while it is always important to consider sanitation in production for shelf life, which we get a lot of questions on, this is focusing mostly on the moistness and softness of the bread and sweet buns. Right? So one way of doing this, of course, is with enzymes and emulsifiers, but this particular member wants to be sort of a little bit more clean label, as they say, and wants to do this via humectants. Now, sugar, of course, is one of those humectants. And these are ingredients that are also known as being hydrophobic, hygroscopic, sorry, which means that they attract a lot of water. And so the thing about sugar, though, is that after you've heated the sugar in the oven and let it cool, it starts to recrystallize. So it loses that softness. But if you use things like invert sugar or corn syrups or high fructose corn syrup, these don't recrystallize as readily. So they keep the bread nice and moist and soft. The important thing to remember, though, is as you replace your sucrose with a syrup, about 20 to 25% of that syrup is water. So you need to adjust accordingly. So if you're taking a kilo of sugar out, you've got to put in more than a kilo of syrup because not all of that is sugar. And you have to keep in mind that that extra that you're putting in is water, and you have to reduce that water in your formula in your dough, or your dough will be way too soft and sticky. And so that's kind of the gist of that conversation there.
Oh, okay. Um, yeah, I mean, humectants is a very tricky thing for, bread and bun systems.
Hmm.
So I hope there will be more discussion there on trying to figure this out.
Absolutely.
Next, I would like to talk about something in uh, cake production
Hmm.
for supermarkets. Is this bakery scaling up?
Yes, this is someone who is scaling up to want to produce cakes for supermarket production volume. And so there's a lot of things to consider here. Their initial question is one of those, again, those global questions of shelf life, right? And there's a lot of things about shelf life with cakes, just like we just talked about humectants. Of course, sanitation is a big one, and preventing mold growth and things like that. And also making sure that you are profitable, that because supermarkets can be quite famous for squeezing pretty hard, right, on those margins, on the points that they want. So make sure you're not lured
Slashing your
in.
margins.
Yeah. Make sure you're not just lured in by all the volume thinking you're going to be making money hand over fist, because you want to make sure you cost it all out. So we've had responses from all of those directions. And on one of the things, and you and I, we like to talk often about the sanitation and making sure that things, you don't get mold and so on. And before you even start about guessing where the mold is coming from, or trying to just throw calcium propionate and other chemicals at it, understand whether you have mold when it comes out and where you're contracting it. So, in other words, what I mean by that is make sure you find a good lab nearby where you can get microanalysis done. That's analysis for yeast, mold, salmonella, and E. coli and things like that. Any of these common bacteria that can be harmful to human health, right? And so then you want to be able to take samples of your cake shortly after they come out of the oven. At each stage where they are handled, you want to take samples and send those samples, label them accordingly, and send them to the lab to have them all analyzed. And this way you'll understand if one of those steps in particular is causing, contributing contamination, right? If there's contamination throughout, then it's the air handling system. Then you've got too much flour dust and mold in the air, and need to get that all sorted out. Oops, I think we lost Lynn. But anyway, I'll continue here till we get Lynn back. So it's all about managing that sanitation. So the thing I always like to remind people of is that if you put something in an oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 to 30 minutes, uh, there's no bacteria that's it's going to survive that. It's basically your cake is coming out of the oven sterilized. So the contamination is happening after it comes out of the oven. Adding calcium propionate or other chemical preservatives is not going to prevent mold growth. It is going to retard it. It's going to make it less likely for it to grow. And some of the tortillas in the market, if you buy them, you can smell and taste the chemical preservative right away because they put so much in trying to combat the mold growth because they're packaging them too warm all the time. When all they have to do is cool them a little bit longer and not put so much calcium propionate in, because it's also not cheap, that stuff. It's expensive. Oops, did we lose you, Lynn? I think Lynn's frozen. Oh, there we are. We have Lynn back again. Oh, now she's backstage.
Okay, sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. Technical difficulties.
Sorry about that. Yeah, yeah,
That's
sorry
that's
about
the
that.
beauty of going of live TV.
Yeah, we seldom do this,
Yeah.
so this is kind of working out the issues we have with live streaming. It's always, exciting connection issues. I dropped off when you were talking about, I believe, calcium propionate. You were saying,
Yes, calcium
or
propionate is not going to completely stop mold growth. It's going
yeah,
to just make
correct.
it less likely, or it'll retard it, right? And make it more difficult for mold to grow. So the important thing is to understand where the contamination is happening and try to manage that, because in essence, the cake comes out of the oven completely sterilized, and now it gets contaminated after it comes out of the oven. But when does that happen? That's the important thing. A lot of times it's because of,
Was there any kind of discussion on whether it's like a frosted cake, a cupcake, or like just a plain,
that hasn't
muffin?
come up yet. That hasn't
Okay.
come up yet. We're trying to flush out some more of those details. Yes,
Yeah.
because if it's the frosting, then it becomes a whole different challenge, and it's much more challenging because there are so many contact points, and that's why if you ever seen any of the automated cake decorating equipment, it's all stainless steel so that it can go in a corrosive sanitation bath every time or in between, because that's the only way to get it as clean as possible. Because it is a point of contact that is difficult to manage.
Yeah, that's correct. So anyway, we have one more question to go,
Mm-hmm.
and it is about making ice cream biscuit with a cookie inclusion and at 0.2% moisture.
Yes, yeah.
What's
So
the
most
problem there,
cookies,
Mark?
yeah. So this is not about water activity. This has got nothing to do with mold growth or anything like that. Most cookies are anywhere from 1 to 1.5% moisture in it. Um,
Hmm.
and they may have, syrups or stuff to reduce the water activity. But in this situation, they want the cookie to be drier because they're going to include it in ice cream. And so, what's going to otherwise happen is that the cookies are going to get too soft in the ice cream because they draw moisture from the ice cream. So, what he has basically come up with, whether it be calculated or whatever, his target is 0.2% moisture in the biscuit to achieve the result that he wants in the ice cream.
Ah,
Um, so the besides the issue of getting down to 0.2% moisture, the other piece of that, the challenge is happening is that the biscuits are checking. And checking is what we see mostly in the cracker industry, because that is something that gets dried out to 0.2% moisture. And it's when you dry too fast and or your flour is too strong. So
mm,
then the cookie, the substrate, the biscuit cannot contract quick enough. And it's basically it creates a lot of tension. And then as it cools, it just cracks at the weakest point. And so the remedy to this is partly is making the flour weaker by adding some cornstarch. I suggest not going over 25% flour replacement, because then for something like this, my fear would be that the cookies get too tender because the cornstarch is going to make them very, very tender, right? And otherwise they will crumble apart when you mix it into the ice cream. And then the other thing is to as I've chatted a bit in this conversation, is to they have a 2 zone oven, so they can change temperatures, but it's just a single belt speed. So, but manage that so that you're baking high at like around 225 or something like that Celsius, so 450 Fahrenheit, something like that to start,
mhm,
and then
mm.
drop it down to like 300, 325 in the second zone, so
Mhm.
that you're drying out nice and long and slow afterwards. So get them
Right.
to rise and color, and then just dry them out. Usually, like with crackers, it would be 4 zones. You would do this repeatedly. Kind of, you would do hot, cool, warm, and then cooler, and
Yeah.
that way you don't get the checking and you get all the lift and everything that you need.
Right.
But since he only has 2 zones, that probably would be the
Smart.
best way for them to go.
That.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would like to say that all these questions that come onto our forum indicates to me that people are trying and
Yeah,
people are trying
absolutely.
to
Yep.
innovate.
Yep.
And when you try to innovate, that's where all the problems come in.
Hmm.
And it's so good to see everyone trying to chip in and trying to help, but most importantly, this is what we were looking for was new ideas, new ways of doing things,
Yep.
and hopefully, new blood into the industry.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. It's like
Yeah,
I all of a sudden I could see the gentleman's face in front of me, but a famous American politician, civil rights leader who recently passed is, like we say, good trouble, right? So this is also like good trouble, right?
it
It's
is
we're
really
having
good
trouble,
trouble when
and it's
somebody
good
asks.
trouble. We're all
Yeah,
learning from it. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I love how varied of a variety our problems are. I mean, we talked about breads, we talk about cookie inclusion, we talk about cake production.
Hmm.
I'm just like, this is awesome. This is great new ideas.
Yep.
So thank
Absolutely.
you, Mark. Thank you for encouraging everyone to step up and discuss and chip in.
My pleasure. I'm
Really
enjoying it,
appreciate
and we have some exciting podcasts coming up the next 2 months. Speaking of innovation, it's gonna wait and see
Well,
here.
I look forward to it, Mark. It's not produced yet, so I can't wait to listen
Yep.
to the end product.
I've had some fantastic conversations you wouldn't
Awesome,
believe.
awesome. I can't wait. Well,
All
thanks,
right.
Mark. Thanks for coming on to today's Forum Friday. We will see you again next month.
Yep. Have a great weekend, everyone. See you in December.